Kanye West has a new song out this week praising Adolf Hitler. And despite being banned from most streaming platforms, it still has managed to garner hundreds of thousands of views. And other artists are taking notice. Rumor has it that since praising genocidal maniacs is all the rage, Katy Perry has already recorded a song about Genghis Khan. And Adam Levine is set to release a solo project later this week simply titled Mao. Now, Kanye may be one of the greatest musical producers of all time, but call me old-fashioned, I just don't care for that Hitler fella. Maybe if he made a song about Stalin or Pol Pot, I could nod along, but Hitler, that's just a bridge too far. I mean, if Ye keeps it up, I might start to think that he's a little anti-Semitic. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Hello, everyone. So we have some fun stories in this world full of craziness for the week. We're going to talk about Kanye's new song, which praises Adolf Hitler, which I did have on my 2025 bingo card. Talk about inflation, and the big story of the week is Donald Trump's free plane from Qatar, or Qatar, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But first, my favorite comment from last week. So actually, my favorite comment comes from my movie review that I did last week of the movie Sinners, which, spoiler alert, is bad. And the comment comes from Chris Y. Zox, who just said, "Garbage review. At least you're bold enough not to wear your hood, LOL." End of quote. Now, this is one of the silliest comments. I actually had a friend of mine message me about this comment because it said, "What a dumb thing to say," which is basically what I said to the guy on YouTube. Sinners kind of has this reputation. I don't necessarily understand it as being a very pro-black movie. It has a mostly black cast, and it kind of, I guess the bad people in the movie, quote unquote, the bad people in the movie are the white people because the vampires are white, and also at the end there's a fight with the Klan who are also white. So it's just got this pro-black movie. This reminds me, though, of Black Panther. If you couldn't honestly say, Black Panther kind of sucked as a movie, didn't really care for it, all of a sudden everyone acted like you were attacking black people in general because you didn't like the movie. That's what this person, Chris, whatever his name is, that's what he's saying. In some cities, it's actually a capital offense to say that you don't like the movie Sinners, so I get it. But it's a bad movie. All right, it is. It's dumb, and it's dumb to accuse people of racism because they don't like it. That is a low IQ move right there. And that stuff doesn't work anymore. Just saying you criticize something that happens to be black and it means you don't like black people. That it doesn't work. People are tired of that. It's stupid. It's a dumb thing to do. And I think people who pull the race card all too often are really, they've just kind of worn it out. It's annoying at this point because the thing is that my friend who messaged me kind of hinted along these lines. If you watch my video from last week, the podcast video, not the movie review, what you'll know or what you'll understand about me is what I said last week. I detest racism. I hate it. I think it is so ridiculous to dislike people based on the color of their skin. I think that applies to black people, and I also think that applies to white people and Asian people and everyone else. It is a ridiculous thing, and it's a stupid move on your part to dislike someone based solely on the color of their skin. And so I made this whole big defense about why racism is dumb in the last video. And then this guy comes out here who obviously doesn't know anything about me and accuses me of racism, and it's just silly, and it's tired, and it doesn't work like it used to. I think that people, because of this kind of stuff where you want to say someone's racist because they don't like the movie Sinners, it just makes real racism, people kind of lump it into this category where you get actual racism, which is terrible, and then people who accuse you of racism for nonsense. And so because so much of the nonsense accusations fly around, we kind of forget about real racism, how it does exist in the world, and is bad. So it's stupid and counterproductive and really just a tool that dumb people use anymore to just accuse your opponents of being racist, or really ad hominems in general. Just name calling is so ridiculous. It shouldn't be the first line of defense in any argument. If you like the movie Sinners, if you can explain to me why it's a good movie and entertaining, I'm willing to listen. I thought it was not a good movie. That's just it. I don't like it. It had nothing to do with the fact that the cast was black. I think Michael B. Jordan is really cool. He's great in the Creed movies. He's been in a couple things that I thought were good. Fruitland Station is a great movie. It's just like, this is a bad movie. What do you want from me? Anyway, it's dumb. Chris, you're dumb. I don't know how else to say it. That's the nicest I could possibly say it. And by the way, if people disagree with me about things, I love that. I love when people disagree with me because that's how we get to good ideas. People disagree, you argue, you go back and forth, you come up with good ideas. So if someone comes in there and says, actually, I think Sinners is great, here's why, X, Y, and Z, that's awesome. We can go back and forth. We can do that about anything. But the second that somebody comes in and lobs accusations that are designed to smear you, the only thing you can do in this case is just dismiss them. Say, all right, I'm not going to talk to you. You're dumb. I don't have time for people who want to come in and accuse me of things or belittle my character or throw ad hominems. That's not the point of what we do. And it shouldn't be the point of public discussion. And normally I don't talk this much about comments, but and it's not even that, again, that comment, I find it amusing because people like that, they're so, obviously you're not a great thinker if that's where you go. And so I'm not worried about that person. And the comment, it doesn't bother me. But it is indicative of a problem that people have in general. Our discourse has become so much mudslinging that it's impossible to actually have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you because all it evolves to or devolves to is name calling. And that's just so ridiculous. Again, I name call. It's fine. I make fun of politicians. I come out here. I do my sarcastic intro. I make fun of people. Like, there's nothing wrong with that per se. But when you're trying to make a substantive point, when you're trying to have a dialogue, you can't just resort to that and think that it wins you the argument. It's the trump card. It's ridiculous. It doesn't work. It's ineffective. It's counterproductive. Anything that you want to say, it's tired and no one cares anymore. And that's the problem. And it's really because people just sling out racism accusations at the tiniest drop of a hat. And people don't care. And it's a shame because when real things happen, when real racist people do real things, we need to be able to talk about it. When Dylan Roof shoots up a church in one of the, I think North Carolina, I can't remember where it was, when he shoots up a church full of black people because he doesn't like black people, we should talk about that because that's despicable and it's terrible and you want to incite racial violence. That's awful. But that's where you have to reserve your calls of racism for. You can't just say something happened, this person's black, therefore racism. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, we're going to move on, but because I could just rant about this because it annoys me. Like, again, the comment doesn't bother me, but the entire thing that it's indicative of does bother me. It bothers me that is so common. It's just an accusation you can lob at anyone. Again, obviously, this person doesn't know me, doesn't know anything about me, but because I'm white, they can lob an accusation of racism at you and think it's just going to stick or make you feel bad. I'm never going to feel bad. Someone accuses me of something I'm not. It'd be like saying, you're a woman or, you're a midget. And I'd be like, well, I'm not either of those things. Why would I be offended by these things? It's silly. I'm not going to be offended or hurt because someone accuses me of things that I'm not. It's a silly thing to allow people on the internet who are anonymous and terrible to hurt your feelings. Don't ever let somebody do that. It's just, don't engage with those people or do what I do. I have a one response rule. Somebody makes a comment. I think, this is not a person whose mind I'm ever going to change because they're obviously a bad person. They get a one comment rule. I'll give one reply. And typically, again, if you say something ridiculous to me, I'm going to say something either sarcastic or ridiculous back because you're not there to engage in a conversation. If you come with a conversation, I will absolutely engage with conversation. If you come with accusations, I'm basically going to dismiss you. Anyway, it's just contempt versus respect. And if you come with respect, I meet you with respect. If you come with contempt, I will meet you with contempt. And that's all it is. It's just an escalation of response that I am happy to engage in, but that's just because none of it bothers me, because none of it's real. It's all on the internet. Don't confuse the internet for real life, as I always say. Don't do that. It's a mistake. Anyway, we have ranted. Oh my God, what is it? It's got to be 5 minutes. Oh my God, way longer. And let's get on with the big stories of the day instead of talking about nonsense on YouTube. Topic 1, Donald Trump's free plane. Now, this was a big story this week, as it should be. It deserves to have some attention because there's a lot at play here that should be discussed. So if you missed the story, basically the Qatari Defense Ministry is considering transferring a Boeing 747 to Donald Trump to replace Air Force One. Or actually, it would be a third plane in the Air Force One rotation that would allow work to be done on Air Force One because they're behind schedule on a replacement plane. So it would be one of the largest gifts to a U.S. president ever. And as I was saying, Air Force One, it's actually two planes. We think of it as one because it has one name, Air Force One, but it's actually two separate planes that kind of go through a rotation. So when one's in the shop, they bring out the other one, and they go back and forth so that they can do maintenance, because obviously the president can't have just one plane, because if something happened, he would be grounded and he wouldn't be able to fly, be a whole thing. So they have two planes that both have the call sign Air Force One. They're 40 years old, those planes. So they are due for a replacement, and actually, Donald Trump negotiated the contract with Boeing back in 2018. But Boeing is slow. So one of the problems for Boeing is that they negotiated a fixed rate with the government in 2018. Well, what happened since 2018? Let's think back to how different life was in 2018. Well, we had a pandemic. We had inflation. We had supply chain issues. Now we have tariffs. So there are a lot of things have changed since 2018. And unfortunately for Boeing, they've had to eat those costs because the government already paid for the planes. They said, this is what you get, Boeing. And Boeing has had, I think, upwards of $1 billion in loss from this project already. And the planes aren't even done. The planes, by the way, they said weren't going to be done until 2029. Donald Trump got in there and said, no, this is not going to work. He worked with Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, and they actually are supposed to get the planes in 2027, I believe, is when it comes. But anyway, so Boeing has been slow. The planes, Air Force One, they are 40 years old. They need to be replaced. So there's an argument to be said, well, it's nice because the president needs a plane. I have no problem with the president driving or flying in a nice plane. He needs a plane, obviously, because there are safety concerns. It's going to be very expensive, which is part of the controversy surrounding this gift from Qatar. And by the way, Qatar can be pronounced two ways. People say Qatar, which I believe is how it's supposed to be pronounced. It's pronounced Qatar. I say Qatar. I've always said Qatar. It looks like Qatar in English spelling. That's just kind of what I say. I think it might actually be pronounced Qatar, but I don't know that 100%. I just have heard people pronounce it that way. So I'm going to say Qatar, just for the record. And so it's this gift from the Qatari government. It's controversial for a number of reasons. One is that it's not really free. The plane would be a transfer to Donald Trump, but it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to actually put this plane in service because it basically has to be stripped down to the studs and retrofitted with communication and security equipment, and also debugged because there's possibility that the government of Qatar would bug the plane. So it's going to cost, you basically have to strip the plane down to the studs anyway to build it back up, to put it in service, because the president, after 9/11, George Bush made some upgrades to the plane because he couldn't communicate while flying well enough. So there have been tremendous amounts of security upgrades and communication upgrades to that plane over the years, and it would be hundreds of millions of dollars just to get it off the ground. So it's not cheap at all. The Pentagon, this was actually a little bit ago, the Pentagon estimates that each VCO-25B plane costs $7.7 billion in long-term operational costs. That's over the course of 30 years. So basically, from the time that the president gets the plane to the end of the plane's life cycle, which they estimate could be about 30 years, it would cost $7.7 billion. Again, I'm not opposed to this in general because I think the president deserves to have a nice plane. I do not think we treat our politicians like royalty. I think the president is somewhat of an exception. I think he should ride around in a very secure, very safe plane. He obviously travels with a lot of people. You need a nice plane. And I have no problem with a very nice flying palace, as this plane has been described. I have no problem with that. The reasons why I have problems with this in particular, this transaction in particular, is because, one, it gives the appearance of quid pro quo. It makes it seem like Donald Trump is accepting a personal gift from Qatar that is worth hundreds of millions or potentially $1 billion, and that is not a good look for Donald Trump. This is a distraction. And you could make an argument. You say, well, it's not Donald Trump accepting a gift. It's the president accepting a gift. And if it's a plane for the president, it's not a big deal because the next president will also be able to use it. So it's clearly not a gift designed to enrich Donald Trump. Except Donald Trump has said that this plane would only serve out the remainder of his term, and then it would be decommissioned to his presidential library. So Ronald Reagan, if you ever go to the Ronald Reagan presidential library, he has a plane in his presidential library. It's like a museum. Donald Trump would get this plane for basically his museum about his presidency. I don't think that's a good look. I think if you were accepting this gift from the government and you said, and the next president gets to use it and the president after that, and it's going to live for 30 years and everyone gets it. It's not me. I don't get to keep it. I'm not going to walk away from the office with it. It would be a different argument. I think it looks bad. And if it looks bad, then you shouldn't be doing it. This is a distraction you don't need. I understand Donald Trump has been very frustrated because the planes are old. They don't work the way they're supposed to. They don't look as nice. I get that. But who cares? They function the way that they're supposed to function at this particular juncture. I get you want a nice plane. You want an upgrade. You're a billionaire. You want the nicest things in life. This is not the way to go about it. This is a bad look for Donald Trump. And because it's a bad look, you shouldn't do it because you don't need to do it. It's a bad look, and therefore it's a distraction from the good things you do. Any time Donald Trump gives a layup to the Democratic Party and the press to insult him and accuse him of graft, he should avoid it. This is a complete self-own. You're shooting yourself in the foot without getting your gun out of the holster. It is not a good thing to do. You don't need to accept this plane. This is controversy you just created out of thin air for no reason. And I get it. Because the media, the corporate press, and the Democratic Party are going to criticize Donald Trump no matter what he does. And I understand that. I really do. But you cannot make it easy for them to criticize you by just waving your hand and creating controversy. That isn't the way to do it. They're going to criticize you about immigration. They're going to criticize you about the economy. They're going to criticize you about these things that matter. Don't allow them the easy layup. You're giving them a lane to drive right to the basket and lay it up with this easy accusation of graft and corruption and greed. And you don't need to do it. You just don't need to have this controversy on your table. It doesn't need to exist, and therefore you should just let it go. But Donald Trump, he has a hard time doing that. He can never let anything go, and it's not a good trait, but again, I don't know. Because here's another thing. The law on this is pretty clear, I believe. I don't think it would necessarily be legal for Donald Trump to accept this gift, and here's why. There's a law passed by Congress in 1966. It's called the Foreign Gifts and Decorations Act, and it caps the amount of money that people in office are allowed to accept from foreign governments, and it caps that number at $480. A $400 million plane seems to exceed that by quite a bit, all right? Like 1 million times more. And so I don't think that it's acceptable. In Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 of the Constitution, here's what it reads. It says, no title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept any present emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. That is as clear as it can be. Any person holding office shall not accept any present, emolument, office, title, or any kind whatsoever from king, prince, or foreign state. This very clearly is a gift. It's a present from a foreign state. It's as clear as day. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 of the Constitution. It's a no. You shouldn't accept this. If he does, again, it's just unnecessary. It is an unnecessary distraction from the good things he's doing in his agenda. And they're going to criticize him for the good things. So don't give him the easy bad things. I guess, a complete self-own from the president on this. I don't understand it. We'll see what happens. We have to keep monitoring the story. We don't know how it's going to play out, but we will see what's happening. By the way, just a note, because as I'm saying this, I realize that in the next few days, this could change. I'm having to record this on the 14th. So it's not going to come out until the 16th. So maybe Thursday, Friday, something changes. But right now, as of Wednesday, nothing's changed. He's still talking about accepting it. Not a good thing, but we'll see how it goes later in the week. Okay, topic 2. Kanye really loves Hitler. I think the people who watch this podcast, they fall into a bunch of different categories. Whenever I look at my analytics for the show, I see people from all over. It's actually kind of crazy how spread out and diverse the analytics are. So Facebook used to give some good analytics. YouTube really gives good analytics, and Spotify does as well. So one of the things that I think would be pretty safe to assume is that some of the people who are older who watch this show probably don't know as much about Kanye as I do. I'm a big Kanye West fan. I used to be. I like his music. I think he's a crazy person. And this week, this is just, it's too much. As we said in the intro, he released a song. Kanye West, he released a song this week. And it's called Hail Hitler. And it is a terrible song. I watched it. I listened to it one time. That's all I needed. I tried to actually find the lyrics of it online, and it was really difficult to do because most of the places have scrubbed the song, which I'm not a fan of. The streaming services, Apple Music and Spotify and SoundCloud all took the song down. I don't think that that's a good move necessarily from tech platforms. I don't think it's their role to take that stuff down. But if it's a private business, you can do what you want. As long as it's not the government saying you can't do it, you have a right to do whatever you want in your private business. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think people are going to convert to Nazism based on Kanye West releasing a song. I think you actually create more controversy around the song by removing it. It's the argument for Mein Kampf. Should Barnes & Noble carry a copy of Mein Kampf, which is Hitler's book that he wrote before becoming Chancellor of Germany? Yes, probably, maybe. It's an important historical book. Should people be reading and studying Mein Kampf to the end of days? No, I don't. But is it a good thing to be able to have as a resource so you can understand why Hitler did the evil things that he did? Sure, you could make that argument. And I would make that argument. It's not the government's role to take that away. Just like it's not the streaming service's job to determine what I can and can't listen to. If it doesn't break the law, which the song does not, then you should allow people to listen to it. Kanye West is obviously mentally ill. This isn't me playing armchair psychiatrist. This is an admission from him. He's bipolar. And something we know about bipolar people is that when they're off their medication, they can be out of control. They go through bouts of depression and bouts of mania where they make choices that rational people would not make. It's why they are medicated. It's why it's important that bipolar people get help from therapists and a lot of times help from pharmaceutical companies because they need it, because this is an actual time when medication can make a difference in people's lives. And Kanye West clearly does not take any medications. He's not on lithium. He's not taking it, or maybe he's supposed to be, but he's not taking it. This song, and all you have to do to know that he's been going down this path is listen to his previous song, which was about having an incestuous relationship with his cousin, which is not good. And obviously it's not something that normal people would put in a song that they release onto Spotify. People are pretending that these songs have artistic merit because it's Kanye West. Because Kanye West, for those people who don't like hip hop, they don't understand it. They wouldn't get this. When I say that Kanye West is one of the best music producers of all time, I mean that. I think that his production value on some of his albums are among the highest of any album I've ever listened to. And if you don't like rap, again, you're not going to understand why that is the case. And I get that. It's fine. You don't have to like it. But you listen to College Dropout, Late Registration, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Life of Pablo. You listen to any of these albums, they're great. They're fantastic. And he's always been a better producer than he was a rapper, but his production value is great. So people want to pretend that Kanye West, because he is somewhat of a musical prodigy, a musical genius, that these songs have artistic merit because they're holding on to that old Kanye West that was great and game-changing and layer upon layer of layer and production value. And they love this stuff. And so they want to pretend that this new Kanye West has artistic merit. Does it? No. He's a great producer. But this song is terrible because it has no artistic merit. It's trying to be transgressive because that's what Kanye's shtick has been for a couple years because he's making subpar music. And so now, and he's mentally ill. And so he has gone this route where because he's been censored, he thinks that he's on to some great truth, as though he's some great moral philosopher, as though Jewish people have done something terrible to him personally. He'll go on podcasts and he'll go on interviews dressed as a Klansman and are wearing a Nazi armband and think that this is edgy because people want to censor him. And therefore, because the Jews want to censor him, that he has to go and rally against the Jews as if this is something new in the history of the world, that he's the first to ever think of it. And it gets to a point where it is ridiculous because to be transgressive, to go against the system, sometimes itself becomes its own parody because there are real rebels. There are real people who fight the power, fight the system. And, that's what punk music was back in the day. And now you look at bands like Rage Against the Machine and Green Day, and they're not transgressive anymore. They toe the Democratic Party line as if they weren't the people who wanted to tear down the system. Now they're part of the system. And it's why the MAGA movement became so big when it did. Donald Trump, we forget because he's been so relevant in political life for the last decade. We forget what it was like when he went down the escalator to start his presidential campaign. He was, and I'm not trying to be mean when I say this, but he was a joke. No one believed he was going to win. He came out there, said ridiculous things, instigated fights, had these big rallies. It was seen as transgressive to support Donald Trump because Donald Trump was the right side's Bernie Sanders. He was a tear down the system kind of guy. And this was a big appeal of MAGA to young people. It used to be that the Republicans were thought of as the old, stuffy, old money with their nose up in the air. And to be Democrat, to be a liberal, was to be the hippie movement and the people who were trying to undermine the system and fight the power. And then that flipped at some point. And the Democratic Party became that party where the school marms, the people who would touch you for making jokes, and the people who were kind of stuck up and they weren't the party of fun, cool people anymore, all of a sudden they were the party that were trying to get you fired for a tweet. And that was part of the appeal of MAGA because a lot of young people came to MAGA because MAGA was seen as transgressive. And so Kanye is trying to be transgressive, but in doing so, he just is making a joke of himself because he's trying to fight a system that doesn't exist. He's being transgressive against Jewish people because the idea is that Jewish people control everything in the United States, which is just objectively not true. The amount of Jews in the United States couldn't fill a city in Delaware. They're small. It's a small percentage of the population. There's not a lot of them, is my point. And so you say, well, they control everything. They don't control anything. The Rothschilds, all this stuff, all these conspiracy theories and anti-Jewish propaganda, this anti-Semitism, it's not transgressive. It's just hateful and really dumb. And so it doesn't make any sense. And eventually that's what it becomes. That's why you look at a band like Rage Against the Machine and you say, well, now they just seem silly. Or Green Day getting up on stage and talking about Donald Trump. It just seems silly because these bands, these punk bands, these rappers who go against the system, eventually they become part of the system or they become parody fighting a system that doesn't exist. And so you look at Kanye and you say, yeah, he's made some great music. He really is one of the best producers of all time. But why do we have to pay attention to him as though the genius in one area transfers to another? There's a phrase, it's called ultra crepidarium. It's when a person expresses an opinion outside of their area of expertise. So this happens a lot in academia. You'll get a guy who is a PhD in physics. And because he's a PhD in physics, he'll talk about environmental science or politics, and he'll speak like an expert because he says, well, I'm an expert. Well, you're an expert in one field, but you're talking about something you know nothing about. And you see this all the time in academia. Well, this is what it's like in every area of life. Kanye West is an expert at music, but he doesn't know anything about anything else. And it becomes clear every time he opens his mouth to talk about moral teachings or philosophy or Judaism or politics, anything outside of the realm of music, he just demonstrates he knows nothing. And so a song like this comes out and it makes more headlines because it's Kanye. But no one's paying attention to this. No one is listening to this song and saying, yes, he makes a lot of great points. I should really look into this Nazism stuff. It just feeds on itself, and the media creates this into something more than it is because Kanye West is it's still one of the most streamed artists in the world. So when he puts out a song, it's going to do numbers. And when you put out a song that's designed to provoke, which is what this song did, it's going to get play. So the whole thing is just messy and ugly. And again, like the Donald Trump plane story, this is completely unnecessary. Someone needs to take Kanye's phone away from him, first of all, and probably put him in an institution for a few days so he can get his lithium sorted out, because this is the kind of stuff that crazy people do, and we shouldn't make crazy people famous. That's one of my biggest things that I can possibly say. You see it on television, you see it in music all the time. You make crazy people famous, and then you're surprised when they act like crazy people. I'm not, but everyone else seems to be surprised that Kanye West, the admitted bipolar guy who doesn't take his medication, is kind of crazy. And I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. But again, this is not a story that is going to, we're not looking at a culture shift. That's not what's happening. It's just a guy being crazy. And because he's famous, the media pays attention to it more than they should. Anyway, we'll leave that there. This last story that we're going to talk about, topic 3, the lowest inflation in years. Now, oh, hello, Winnie. I know that the economy is in a bit of an interesting predicament, because there's potential that Donald Trump's tariff policy, his economic plan, everything is going to work fantastic. And there's potential that it doesn't. And that's why the market's doing what it does. It's playing yo-yo. It's going back and forth. We don't really know what's happening. I will say this week, that the inflation numbers surprised a lot of people. It surprised many economists. It surprised me, which is hard to do because I'm always right about everything. But it is great news. It's great news for the economy this week. And everyone can play the predictor who says that the economy is getting ready to capsize. But we don't know. And because we don't know, I think that these inflation numbers are a very strong sign. The Consumer Price Index rose 0.2% last month, which put the 12-month inflation cycle at 2.3%. Now, these are the lowest numbers since February of 2021, and that is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's great news. This is the lowest numbers in 4 years. The biggest driver of inflation in the last month was housing, which makes up about 1/3 of the index. Housing went up 0.3% in April, which accounted for half of all of the inflation numbers. So our economy, it's kind of weird, because I remember this, it's driven by two forces, really. It's driven by consumerism and housing. And those two things, more than anything else, drive our economy, because we don't manufacture as much as we used to. We don't export as much as we used to. So it's built on the service industry and buying nonsense and our housing prices, which just go up and up and up. It reminds me, there was a quote from Vladimir Putin. I know it's a weird guy to quote, but I remember this because it always stuck with me. And I wish I could find it. I tried to find the exact words that he used when he said this, but it was something to the effect of, he was confused why the American economy was so strong because it seemed to be centered around buying and selling houses. And I've always thought that there is a lot of truth in that. It's our economy has crashed when the housing market goes down, and not the other way around. It's not that the market goes down and then the housing market falls. The housing market dictates much of the economy, which I think is very strange. And looking at these numbers, even though housing ticked up by 0.3%, I think it's a good sign that the economy could track well, because no one expected inflation to be down closer to 2%. Again, inflation doesn't really need to exist the way it does, but 2% is the goal. And so if we were up to 8% at one point during the pandemic and Joe Biden's presidency, so it's nice to be back closer to 2%, which is the goal of the Fed. It doesn't need to exist in general, but it's hard to do. Argentina managed to drop their inflation numbers dramatically. I think there was a month where they actually had negative inflation, which is crazy. You never see that in a modern economy. So it doesn't need to exist, but as long as it hangs around 2% and Donald Trump has managed to get it down to 2%, I think that's a great thing. And what you're seeing, a lot of that is driven by energy costs lowering, food costs coming down, and again, a lot of the consumer products coming down. Will the tariffs tick those back up? We don't know. But right now, 2.3% is great. And I think that is a great thing for Donald Trump to just put a feather in his cap and say, hey, none of you expected inflation to come down. I imposed all these tariffs. I had a plan. Inflation is down. The economy's up. This is great news. It's a win. It's a Trump win. And if the story about the plane didn't distract from it, this would be bigger news. And I think that's an important thing. Anyway, okay. We are going to leave it there for the week. As always, questions, comments, concerns down in the comments, and I will catch you guys next Friday.